Have to come into the office with the flu? Okay. About 10 years ago, my employer didn't have a sick leave policy. It was at your supervisor's discretion. One year I got the flu and was in bed for several days. On the third day, my supervisor called and said I had to come into the office the next day. I explained I have the flu and look and feel terrible and was still very sick. He said no excuses and no exceptions. His policy is 3 days max. So the next day I went into the office and the president of the company said, "Jesus, why are you here? You look terrible. Go home." I explained that I had to see my supervisor since he said I had to come in. Supervisor sent me home after the president told him he had to. The next week, about 75% of the staff in that office was out with the flu for the week. It was a quiet week for me. I'm a team leader and I've had a hell of a time trying to stop presenteeism in my workplace. If you're ill and want to work, then work from home, and if you are ill and don't want to work, then rest at home. It's not particularly tricky. I judge people much more harshly for turning up sick than taking sick leave. Last week on Monday, my daughter was very sick. Her kids were sick. She tried to call in, but boss said she had to come in. She did. On Tuesday, she ended up in urgent care. Fluid on her lungs. Double ear infection. Kids were bad off, too. She stood up to boss and said she wasn't coming in. Wednesday, boss calls her in a panic. He's deathly ill. Same symptoms daughter had. He needs her to come in because he's too sick. She told him no. It's his fault he made her work sick on Monday. He worked sick that day. Thursday, most of the staff is out sick. He's running on a skeleton crew and thinks he needs to go to the hospital. Daughter, still sick, refuses to go in. Friday, she's feeling better. She goes in. Boss is down for the count. And he has family coming into town. Wonder how many of those family members are sick today. All because he just had to make her work on Monday. This is also why I disagree with perfect attendance awards at schools. When my kids were in public school, there were plenty of kids who would come to school sick because or their parents wanted that award. Apparently not missing a single day of school all year, or in a very few cases, from kindergarten through 12th grade, is something to be proud of? No clue why. But I remember one parent actually bragging to me their kids skipped their grandparents' funeral so they wouldn't have an absence and break their perfect attendance streak. My workplace quit accepting doctor notes this year. A few years ago, when I got a new job for a less than reputable company, I came down with a really contagious virus less than a fortnight after I started with them. Vomiting and severe lightheadedness to the point that I could barely walk 10 meters without being on the verge of passing out. I texted the rostering manager and explained the situation, then said I'm calling in sick and offered to get a doctor's note. He said that unless I can organize a replacement, I can't call in sick. Unable to do so, because I didn't know the phone numbers of the staff members and I didn't want to risk failing my probationary period. I toughed it out and went to work. I made it 2 hours before the site manager sent me home. I got a taxi to the doctor's office and got a doctor's note saying I had a virus, as well as a blood test to prove I wasn't drunk, as there were a few accusations after people saw me stumbling around and I vomited 3 times in 2 hours. But before I left, I spent 2 hours in a closed room with 7 other staff members. The next day, pretty much every staff member called in sick and the rostering manager couldn't cover the staff members, and the office was ridiculously understaffed. We needed 10 staff to operate normally, and only 2 turned up. So karma struck the rostering manager. The company tried having a go at me for coming in sick when I should have stayed home. But I had proof that I tried calling in sick and the company refusing to let me and being told to cover it myself by rostering. Both turn out to be illegal actions, and the rostering manager lost his job. The company I worked for closed down 2 months later, which was unsurprising. They were doing heaps of illegal stuff. Blackmailing staff into 24-hour shifts. Underpaying staff. Expecting staff to cover shifts themselves. Giving people 12-hour shifts without giving breaks. Expecting staff to work 30 days in a row without paying overtime rates. And threatening to fire them if they refused. Staff exploitation and a few other illegal things. I felt absolutely no sympathy for the management whatsoever, and it sucks to be them because it's entirely their fault. I've always marveled at presenteeism. The pinheads that rise to positions of running things don't have a clue that mistreating their workers will always reduce their group's yield. I never really thought about this, and people who bragged about never taking a sick day until I got a job working in the public health department of a college. I came in to work with the sniffles one day. A couple of epidemiologists sat me down and gave me a lecture on how disease spreads. They also went over a cost-benefit analysis of one person staying home a few days versus coming in and spreading it to multiple people that would then be out a few days each. Even if nobody stays home, work suffers because people can't do a good job when they feel terrible. Now I call in sick when I feel like I might be coming down with something. Aside from a bout with COVID, this has meant I need about half the sick days that I used to. Apparently staying home in bed when I feel something coming on gives my system a chance to fight it before it gets really bad. I will never understand why places do this. Face with raised eyebrow. It really doesn't take much contact to spread things like colds and flu. Here in the UK, they've just given nurses, pharmacists, physiotherapists and occupational therapists the ability to give sick notes. Started 1st of July 2022. No more trying to get in to see a doctor. Thumbs up. That's basically impossible anyway. Face with symbols on mouth. Edited with correct start date. Thumbs up. One person for an extra couple days, or 75% for a week plus. Damn, math's hard I guess. What a jerk. Yeah, we went through this when I was in the Air Force. Squadron policy, at the time, was if you were sick DNIF. Duties not to include flying. You came into the office to do desk duty. Made 0 sense. Because of course within a couple of weeks half the squadron was DNIF. Finally got a commander with some sense and policy was changed. Reasons why you shouldn't make someone work when sick. 1. It is a dick move and they won't get any work done. 2. They might infect everyone else and then you'll be out a lot more staff. In medical school I had to see patients while having the flu. Apparently I was faking. How can sick leave be at an employer's discretion? Your manager is not a doctor and in no position to make judgment about your condition and whether you're too sick to work. Over here it's our employee's discretion. If the employer doubts, they can ask a third party to review, which usually only happens with long-term illness, is then a recovery plan and possibly amended. Workload has to be set up as well. Many years ago I was the director of an aged care facility. One winter we had a flu epidemic. Staff and residents were affected. Next year flu vax, and if you had symptoms you had to stay home. We had a good sick leave policy. Australia. It was easier to replace one staff member for a week rather than the whole staff over several weeks. I'm a department manager in a huge retail store. I told one of my coworkers, who suffers from terrible migraines all the time, that if he ever feels one coming and has to leave, just go. He doesn't even need to tell me. Just point at his head and leave. Their health is paramount. The job comes second. We work to live, not live to work. It's my philosophy and I make sure that the team knows it too. The company I work for in the US has unlimited sick days. If you are sick, stay home and don't get the rest of us sick. If you are sick for an extended period, get a doctor's note, but don't come to work until you are better. After 30 years of working for companies that had antiquated policies about sick time, PTO? Why do I have to burn vacation time if I am sick? It feels nice to be treated like an adult. Edited for grammar. I had the same thing happen to me, but worse. I was in the army at the time, and on winter exercises with about 800 other people, after a particular cold night, -20°C, where I winded up standing in my underwear for about 15 minutes. Don't ask. I woke up feeling absolutely miserable. I went to my lieutenant and tried to convince him to let me go see the doctor. It took 20 minutes to convince him, and then I had to promise to be back within the hour. The doctor took one look at me and put me into quarantine. To put it in his words, "If I let you get back to your unit, we will have everybody bedridden within a week." And indeed, despite the quarantine, 1 day of isolation and then back with a supply run to base. By the end of the week, about 70% of the men were down with the flu. Me. I got back to base and got picked up by my mother the next day. Could barely stand on my feet. Never mind driving back home. And spend an entire week bedridden. TLDR. Took down a unit of 800 soldiers without firing a shot. This has been a problem in my office even during COVID. Manager is a dick and thinks we're all losers who would claim 40 hours a week to watch Netflix if we worked from home. So we were mostly in the office except when things were really bad. We'd have people come in with just allergies, no mask. Then they go home that night and test positive for COVID. Had this with a close work college when I worked fro British Gas call center. He had used up his allotted sick leave and ended up with a nasty flu. Manager sad of you don't come at you get a strike and you're only allowed 3 strikes and they find ways to sack you. So he came in and this strain of flu was virulent. Within 2 days well over half the office was off. Worst flu it ever had. Your supervisor is a POS.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.